We hear this all of the time. You are dysregulated. You need to get regulated. What does it really mean to be emotionally regulated? And what causes dysregulation and what can you do about it? This video is going to go into all of those things, and the second part will have, I think, 4 main techniques or skills either demonstrated or referred to out of this book on DBT skills, the skills workbook. DBT was originally created to help those with borderline, but it has become a very important and powerful tool to use for many different varieties of those who struggle, those of us who struggle with dysregulation. So we're going to go into 4 different ways to deal with that, and at the end of this video, 4 different techniques. One of them is going to be the safe place guided imagery exercise, which I'm going to record today, and I'm going to post it without any ads, only before and only after, so that you can practice it and use it as a tool. I also think on my free course, there's a free downloadable option as well, an MP3 version, but I wanted to create a place here on YouTube also where you could kind of use that. It is my favorite guided meditation, and I'll talk more about that in the video, but it is something that I have used for years. It's the first one I've learned, and it's my go-to when I feel dysregulated. So, who feels dysregulated? What kinds of, situations in our lives can create that? Of course, trauma, following a trauma, basically after a trauma, whether it's a single event trauma like PTSD or complex PTSD, living in that symptomatology where you just feel, anxious or depressed or out of sorts, things like that. Certainly those who have autism can feel that sense of dysregulation for many reasons, often the baseline being the sensory triggers in the body and how all of that plays out. People who have mood disorders like bipolar, depression, anxiety, people who have ADHD, borderline personality disorder, really anything that disrupts our ability in our body and our minds to kind of feel in control of our emotions. And that's really what emotional dysregulation is. It's a sense of being unable to manage or control what's happening in your emotional world. So, what does it look like and feel like? Because you may not realize that you are actually dysregulated. You might, for many of us, I think it is such a common state of being going through our day, and especially if you have, for example, a form of autism or borderline or anxiety, where you're just a generalized anxiety disorder, I would say, where you're just like going through your day, and so often you have these big or little moments of just feeling dysregulated. For me, I can get so anxious that I have to just stop and sit down on the couch or on the floor and lay on my meditation pillow just to breathe, because it'll be for no reason oftentimes, but that's a different story. So what kind of symptoms do we see? Like, what is related to emotional dysregulation? It can look like feeling on edge, feeling worried or chronically stressed, kind of forecasting like the worst case scenarios all of a sudden, feeling panicked. It can be ruminating, where you're kind of like going over your thoughts or worries again and again and again. It can be like anger and being overly reactive. It's like out of nowhere. Why did I just get mad about that? I thought I was fine and I seemed suddenly triggered. You can just be irritable, just generally irritable. It might look like I'm saying, like a true rage. It could be you just being kind of like sassy and sarcastic, but more than you'd like to. Like your go-to is like, it's like this negative, condescending, critical, whatever voice. That might be a part of your dysregulation. It might be that you're just noticing that your sensory triggers are highly active, but maybe you don't know they're triggers. So things like walking in the house and smelling a certain smell is triggering, or having the neighbors be too loud, the TV too loud, noticing the texture on your clothes and being like, oh, this is just so uncomfortable, I don't like this, and maybe you can't change it. You wore something new to work. It could really be something that you see and it triggers something in you that activates, maybe let's say a flashback or your nervous system. And oftentimes these senses, you don't necessarily know it's happening. I've talked a lot about my sensory triggers and how much they dysregulate me, and that was part of why I'm doing this deep dive on ASD and high masking ASD, I should say, and complex trauma. Is my daughter saying, like I've said in many videos, like, oh my God, everything bothers you. And it can be something as stupid as I go to pick up, let's say Cane's chicken, And it's almost always hot, and I like my food hot. I just if I'm gonna have like something that's like less healthy for me, I want it to be like really good. You know, if it's like cheese fries and all of that. And if I get delivered the meal and the cheese fries are the kind that have been like refried, and you can tell when they're old, right? They've been like repurposed. They're not really hot and fresh. Or I get the drive-through at the Cane's and we start driving home and it's like not even not hot. It's just warm. And it bothers me so much inside. And this is part of why I'm doing this whole other series. It's like, why does that matter? Who cares? But I have this image in my head. And if I'm not mindful, it can like, we can pick it up and drive home. And the whole way home, like I'm eating it, but I'm annoyed. I'm like, I'm having this. It's not very healthy. It's not even that good. You know, it's this whole thing, which sounds dumb. Obviously, dysregulation can be way bigger than that. But it can be something small like that where I have to work at not being annoyed all the way home, which is stupid. But I can't help that, right? So that's an example. Crying a lot, having a lot of mood shifts where you're high highs and low lows, being impulsive, feeling a lot of shameful feelings or bad about yourself. That can be a sign, like maybe someone said something at work to you and it triggered a shame spiral, and now you're just feeling really bad and, you know, moody or just yucky in your body in some way or negative. It can show up in relational conflict. It can show up in you being overly controlling or perfectionistic of yourself or rigid all of a sudden. It can look like self-wounding, intrusive thoughts. It can look like not being able to focus and being distracted. You know, you're trying to do something and you just can't seem to keep your mind on it. It can definitely look like chronic exhaustion and fatigue where you feel just like you have nothing left to give and burned out and numb. It can be coming out in sleep issues and gastrointestinal issues, hormone imbalances, all kinds of things around your body. How you engage with food and the way you engage with eating, the way you crave foods, your appetite, like all of that can be specific things, but it can also truly be a dysregulation inside where it's just, you're not really in your more ventral vagal calm self. So what can you do about it? We're going to talk about that. Really quickly, the main causes, though, are going to be things like invalidating environments, reminders of trauma, brain chemistry issues, injuries to your brain, and like I said before, neurological issues. So all of those things can be the underlying thing, and they can have this connection to dysregulation. And really what we're talking about when we're talking about dysregulation is that our window of tolerance, if you've heard this term by Dan Siegel, it's basically the space we have to tolerate without kind of blowing our lid, or I would say collapsing or shutting down. And my window might be like this or this, right? Yours might be like this or this. The point is, when we're outside of the window of tolerance, we are dysregulated, right? So maybe I can do the chicken thing one day and be like, oh, this is kind of annoying and whatever. It's not bad. It's not that cold. It's actually warm. But another day, it can, like I said, can really bother me, or it could be obviously something, you know, as I said, much bigger. But I don't want to minimize how dysregulating that can feel. And that's also like embarrassing. Why does this bother me? It could be, like I said before, triggered by relationships and things like that. So what can you do? I want to go into, I'm going to read some skills from this book. The first piece of this, when you're trying to manage and regulate emotions, is to learn to tolerate the distress. And I've discussed this in a lot of videos. It's like part of what we need to work on is managing like that distress. Let's say when I'm driving home after I've picked up the food order. And there are a lot of techniques and tools, from, you know, true distraction techniques, counting, you know, all kinds of meditations, things like that, or I should say practices. But the one I want to refer to is the safe place. And that's the one I'm going to post in the next few days. I'm going to post a video on that one. And basically that is a guided meditation where you imagine a safe place, a place that makes you happy and calm. For me, it's often been Paris or the beach. And so I'll walk you through that, but that's a way you could do it to tolerate what's happening, to kind of get your mind out of that space. The next one is to understand that we're talking about how to engage mindfully. So when we're dysregulated, we're often not connected in our mind and body to what is, to the present, to what is happening. And so there's a lot of mindfulness and advanced mindfulness skills in here. In fact, the sections are basic and advanced for distress tolerance, mindfulness, and emotional regulation skills. And the last one would be emotional regulation skills. So the first one, I would say you're gonna have to find the other video for. You can also search this, it's anywhere, just Google safe place. The main thing with guided meditations is to find someone's voice who you do not find triggering or annoying. So if they're doing the meditation and you're thinking, oh, their voice is annoying or weird or creepy, or the way you say that word is triggering, pick someone else, because that's you getting out of the process. So we're going to go through what's called the single object mindfulness exercise. And basically what you're going to do here is you're going to pick a small object to focus on. So I was going to say this pen, but this is not a great one. But for example, you pick a small object, something that can rest on a table, is safe to touch, and emotionally neutral. So don't pick something that reminds you of, let's say, your divorce or your child that's going to be emotionally triggering. We want it to be something that has a very neutral baseline of emotions. It can be a pen, a flower, a watch, a ring, a cup, something similar. Don't choose to focus on something that could hurt you or on a picture of someone you don't like. That will stir up too many emotions. So you're going to want to get comfortable. You're going to want to turn off any distracting sounds, your phone. And you can do this once or twice a day, whenever you need to. And all of these are like practices. The more that you do them, the better you get. Sometimes you'll burn out on one, it doesn't work anymore, so you want to find a new one. So these are the instructions. I'm going to read them to you, as I said once again, from this book. To begin, sit comfortably and take a few slow, deep breaths. Then, without touching the object, begin looking at it and exploring its different surfaces with your eyes. Take your time exploring what it looks like. Then try to imagine the different qualities that subject or object possesses. What does the surface look like? Is it shiny or dull? Does it look smooth or rough? Does it look soft or hard? Does it have multiple colors or just one color? What else is unique about the way the object looks? Take your time observing the object. Now hold the object in your hand and reach out and touch the object. Begin noticing the different ways it feels. Is it smooth or rough? Does it have ridges or is it flat? Is it bendable or rigid? Does it have areas that feel different from one another? What does the temperature of the object feel like? If you can hold it in your hand, notice how much it weighs. What else do you notice about the way it feels? Continue exploring this with your sight and your sense of touch. Continue to breathe comfortably. When your attention begins to wander, return your focus to the object. Keep on exploring the object until your alarm goes off or until you have fully explored the qualities. I forgot to mention you can set a timer if you want. So when you're doing that, what's happening is you're getting your mind out of the past or whatever the trigger is or the emotion. You're getting yourself into the present moment. And in that moment, you are reducing the distress because you're removing your focus on the distress and putting it somewhere else. There are many in this book. That's a great one. The next one is to understand how to identify your emotions. Now I'm going to do two exercises here because I think for many people, when you are a survivor of trauma or complex trauma, it's not that you can't feel your feelings, it's that you might feel them too much, that's one thing. But it might also be that you've learned to shut down what you feel and you don't know how to connect to your emotions. So I'm going to walk you through just a brief exercise and what that looks like. And then we're going to do what's called an opposite action. This is another way to deal with regulating your emotions, right? But first we have to identify what those are. So we're going to start with that. So I'm going to presume that you understand, what feelings are. But one of the things you can do is Google a feelings wheel, emotional charts, things that have a bunch of different ways to describe feelings or just basic feelings. If you're not clear on, is that, anger or sadness? Is that frustration or, irritability, whatever it is. So what you're going to do is follow the 6-step process where, let's say something's happening and you've recognized in your body and in your mind, which is often might be in your chest where it feels tight or your shoulders are hunched up or now your head hurts. When you're feeling something and distressed, there's usually almost always, even if you've learned to not focus on them, a bodily symptom. That is your nervous system being dysregulated. And I didn't go into that whole process, but that is the idea in the heart of polyvagal theory, that our nervous system is going into a response. Even when we don't want to up here, our body is living in the past, the trauma, whatever it is, our body has been conditioned to respond certain ways. And we tend to have go-tos, like our go-tos are more fight or flight versus freeze, things like that. So we're going to presume that you identified that your body is feeling something, your mind is feeling something, there's something going on. You recognize it. Maybe your heart is fluttering. So you're going to ask yourself, what happened? Try to identify what's happening right now. What may have caused this? Why do you think that situation happened? So you're going to ask yourself and explore, and I would encourage you to journal about these or to make a little list. So why did it happen? Whatever happened, what's going on? How did the situation make you feel, both emotionally and physically? And that goes back to connecting that mind and body. What did you want to do as a result of how you felt? So maybe you wanted to scream and lose it, for example, but you don't really want to do that, but you felt rage inside. What did you do and say? Well, I yelled, for example, or I decided to go outside and walk around the block and I counted to 100 twice. Or I did some breathing exercises. But often once you're really triggered, you can't necessarily get to that calm space. But it does help to use your body. That's why I love cardio and exercise, especially for anxiety and those kinds of like angsty dysregulations. And then how did your emotions affect you later? So let's say you reacted in a way that you wish you didn't, and now your partner's mad at you all day, or now you're shaming yourself. Or maybe you feel like, oh, actually, I could have been really upset, but I feel much better today. So you want to learn to recognize your emotions. And in this book even, if you can see, there's a worksheet here. You can create your own worksheets. You can download them on the internet for free. They're basically recognizing your emotions worksheet. So here it says, question, when did the situation happen? Your response. And then you would write, what happened? Describe the event. What did you think? Why do you think the situation happened? Everything I just said. So that's an example there. And then the last thing is, let's say you actually know what your feelings are and you don't want to be in your feelings. You need to get out of your feelings and do something different, because when you're too much in your feelings and too dysregulated, you respond in ways you don't feel good about. So this is called the opposite action here on this page. And what it says is that doing the opposite of your emotional urges, because remember, many of us who have these dynamics, we're impulsive, we're reacting from our feelings, and feelings sometimes need to be like honored and respected, but not necessarily the only data we're using to then make decisions based on. So, for example, it has a chart here too where it says emotion, anger, emotion-driven behavior, attack, criticize, hurt, shout. What would the opposite action be? Validate, avoid or distract, use the soft voice. Fear, that's the emotion. I was afraid. What is the emotion-driven behavior behind my fear? I tend to avoid or hunch my shoulders. What would be the opposite action? Approach what you fear, do what you've been avoiding, stand tall. So I'm going to read the directions. It says, notice that opposite action changes both body language, your posture and facial expression, as well as your actual behavior. Opposite action isn't about denying or pretending an emotion isn't happening. Rather, it is about regulation. You acknowledge the emotion, but use the opposite behavior to reduce it or encourage a new emotion. There are 6 steps to creating opposite action. Number 1, start by acknowledging what you feel. Describe the emotion in words. Ask yourself if there's a good reason to regulate or reduce the intensity of this emotion. Is it overpowering you? Does it drive you to do dangerous or destructive things? Number 3, notice the specific body language and behavior that accompanies that emotion. What are your facial expressions and your posture? What are you saying and how are you saying it? What specifically do you do in response to that emotion? Number 4, identify the opposite action. How can you relax your face and body so that it doesn't scream, I'm angry or I'm scared? How can you change your posture to convey confidence and vitality rather than depression? How can you move toward, not away from, what scares you? When you are angry, how can you acknowledge or ignore rather than attack? Make a plan for opposite action that includes a specific description of your new behavior. Number 5, fully commit to opposite action and set a time frame to work at it. How long will you maintain the opposite behavior? As you think about making a commitment, keep in mind why you want to regulate your emotions. What's happened in the past when you gave in to emotion-driven behavior? Were there serious costs to you or others? Number 6, monitor your emotions. As you do opposite action, notice how the original emotion may change or evolve. Opposite action literally sends a message to the brain that the old emotion is no longer appropriate and helps you shift to a less painful emotion. So once again, there are some more worksheets in here, and there are blank copies you can create yourself or photocopy, for example. But the idea is when you are dysregulated, there are things you have to work on doing. You have to tolerate the feelings, identify the feelings, create a plan of action, get into the present, and then maybe do some things that actually help move you out of that space. So those are some. There are so many more, like I said in the book, but I think that honoring how often we are dysregulated, and most of us just don't know what to do about it. We're suffering through it, we're numbing it, we're avoiding it, we're doing things that aren't serving us, we're responding in emotion-driven ways that are impulsive and create more chaos or more hurt for us. And of course, depending upon where you are on the spectrum, that might be a little bit or might be a lot. For those who have borderline, for example, a lot of the things that drive that emotion behavior can be very destructive. Whether they're, saying something hurtful, engaging in their own harmful ways, all of that can be impactful, but it doesn't mean you have to have, some type of truly significant disorder to feel dysregulated. We all feel dysregulated. And for so many of us, these things are formed in our bodies, in our stories, in our, neurobiology, in our trauma, in our childhoods, and they just become like this living thing inside of us. And that's why it's so important to be actively engaged in trying to work on not feeling so dysregulated so often. And of course, I would say lastly, what also can make all of that worse is lack of sleep, which is huge for so many people. Not having any exercise, right? So not moving your body in any way. I promise you, if you just put your shoes on or go barefoot out the door and you just take a walk into a blue and green environment, it will be one way to get out of your brain. You can put headphones on, listen to music. That's one way to tolerate distress, to get into another space, to get outside and to move your body. All of that engages sort of your inner and exterior world. It can be very, very helpful. So whatever it is, if you want to add some more of your own techniques, please feel free to share. And know that you're not alone in this. It's just that it does take some work sometimes. And the more you do it, the kind of like growing a yoga practice or exercise, like at the gym, the stronger you get at it. But definitely things like sleep, eating, exercise, your basic self-care can have a huge impact. And it can make you much more dysregulated much more quickly. So don't forget to focus on those things, let alone underlying difficulties, mental, physical health issues, places where you might benefit from support and treatment, and all of those things. So thanks for being here. Please stay safe and well, and I'll see you soon.